Thank you for joining me today. I am Allison Bartlett. I am the Senior Manager of Disability Programs at HDSA, and today we will be talking about laying the groundwork for disability and beyond. I know it's such a fun topic for 9 a.m., but I will say I'm not going to be talking about Social Security disability today because that's a whole beast in and of itself. This is just kind of understanding the process, because when you have something like Huntington's disease, planning is a process. There's a lot of things that go into it, so I'm going to touch on a lot of different things today. Yeah. Okay. You know, just the general important legal stuff. Okay, so today specifically what I'm going to be talking about is the disability umbrella, the importance of planning, the legal planning, insurance benefit planning, and then I'm going to touch briefly on long-term care planning, but I know there's going to be another presentation in this room later this morning that goes a lot more in depth into long-term care planning. But the first thing I want to say is disability is not just Social Security. Disability is not just a financial benefit. Disability technically is a way of life. Like, the definition in the dictionary is any condition that makes it more difficult for a person to do certain activities or interact with the world around them. So that could mean working, your daily activities, chores, your hobbies that you once did. It means a lot of different things. And then specifically when we think about HD and disability, like when we think about disability in the HD community, a lot of people just think it's when the person can no longer work. But it's also when you start to have trouble with activities of daily life that includes chores, cooking, bathing, dressing, and your hobbies. It's just any little thing that impacts you. I would tell people on a Social Security disability application, do you have issues with zippers or buttons? Like, getting that minute into difficulties that you have is really helpful because it's a change. They're looking for any change that you have in your life, no matter how big or how small, it's a change. So this is the disability umbrella. This is a concept that I have created. I've worked in this community for 8 years now, and I've worked for HDSA for 4. And when I came on, I was just a Social Security disability specialist. But as I've worked with this community, it's very clear to me that in addition to understanding disability benefits, which includes Social Security, we need to understand health insurance, other insurance coverage, that's like life insurance and things like that, legal planning, financial planning, and then long-term care planning, because all of these things go together. Like, everything, all these bullet points end up making up long-term care planning. And if you're missing a section of this umbrella, like you have a broken umbrella and it's not going to keep you dry when it rains. And so I think it's important to talk about all of these issues. I'm going to talk about a lot of these things today. So, why do we all need to care about disability planning? I want to say it's because I say so, but that's not a good answer. There's a lot of reasons. It's because disability is a long and complicated process. The sooner you start preparing, the better, because it'll make you more comfortable. You'll be in control of what's going on, and you'll just understand the different options that are presented to you, because everybody's plan and journey is going to look a little bit different. You will lose out on possible benefits if you do not plan ahead. Once a benefit is gone, is gone. Our legal system doesn't have any exceptions for Huntington's disease or any other condition. Like, if you don't abide by the very strict rules and procedures, you're going to miss out on things. No one is going to make you sign up for the benefits you need. Like, you might encounter a wonderful social worker at some point in your journey who's like, oh, you need these things. But a lot of times that happens, sometimes it happens right at the right moment, and sometimes you don't go to that social worker until you've missed out on some things, and you're still going to benefit from it, but it means you're not going to get everything that you needed. And the importance of preparation means it can help you expedite the benefit application process. It can help you get approved for benefits. Like, the more you understand about this process, the more control you have, and the more likelihood you are of getting approved. It can help you better understand and describe your symptoms and limitations for yourself, your loved ones, and your medical care team. And it can help you advocate for yourself. With Huntington's disease, you have to advocate for yourself every day for the rest of your life. And that's hard, it's exhausting. But these are things to help you be able to do that, so there's not as much of a burden on you. And you may want to ignore disability. It's one of those things we don't talk about. We don't talk about wills, we don't talk about death planning, we don't talk about a lot of things. We don't talk about what benefits you should have when you start your first job. So we do not do a great job of talking about important issues. But these things aren't going anywhere. And I want to empower people, and I want to empower the community to be like, no, this isn't that scary. I can do this. These are things I'm entitled to, and I'm going to take them. I'm gonna make people start saying a mantra to make sure that they get their benefits they deserve. So this is just like kind of a little infographic to show in an ideal world how I would like this all to play out. Like when you have you or your loved one have pre-symptomatic HD, you consider this a planning stage, which where you do research. You research financial, legal, and disability options. You know what is out there, and you start looking into like what's going to be the best thing for you. Not everybody can afford the same insurance policy. Not everybody needs a whole life insurance plan. Not everybody can invest $100,000 into the stock market. You do what's right for you. And then in early to mid-stage HD, it's the action stage. It's when you obtain the disability, it's when you put legal and financial documents in place, so you can have everything in place once the person can no longer make decisions for themselves. And then by late stage HD, this is what I would call the benefit stage. This is where you want the person to use the benefits that are already in place, transfer to long-term care. You don't want to have to worry about getting things last minute or short notice, because it's really hard. You can't get conservatorship or guardianship with a snap of your fingers. Medicaid does not happen overnight, and a lot of people end up in situations where it's an emergency and they need these things immediately, and you can't get them immediately. I forget to breathe when I talk sometimes because I have so much to say. Okay, so first we're going to talk about legal planning. And legal planning includes asset protection. So like there's a little bit of crossover with financial planning and legal decision making. And these things are really, really important in the HD community because of the length of HD progression. Care gets expensive. And generally with Huntington's disease, cognitive and behavioral symptoms ultimately lead to a person not having capacity to make decisions anymore. So you need to have the documents in place so you can make sure you take care of them. And somebody can be their decision-making person without having to go to court. So why does this matter? Proper legal documents take time, planning, and cognitive awareness. Certain documents you have to have capacity to sign or you can't sign them. And the more options you have in this process, the better. So like the earlier you start planning, the more options you will have. You don't want to have to worry about spending down assets in order to get the benefits you or a loved one needs. And Medicaid wants to get paid back. They will take the family home. They will take things, if you have not planned, and put things in protective places. The other thing is, legal planning can be expensive. Like, I don't remember if, but it's just as a comparative, like, a power of attorney, a durable power of attorney document might cost $500, but guardianship can cost $10,000. So the $500 is a significantly better investment than having to pay $10,000 or just being like, it's out of my hands. Because I've worked with elder law attorneys who literally give family the option of, you have these 3 options that can be expensive, or you have the 4th option, which is you just do nothing. And sometimes families are put in a position where they have to do nothing, or they have to hope like the state will bring guardianship, but sometimes you're waiting forever and nothing happens. And I've seen this so many times. HD individuals find a way to fall through every single gap we have in our legal system. So without the proper legal documents, people will fall through the gaps in the legal system, in the healthcare system, in any way they can. And this includes, and oftentimes people with HD get in legal trouble, so civil, criminal, bankruptcy, family law issues. They're not able to afford or access proper care, and then they're denied access to government benefits. Like there's a lot of things that can happen because of the way HD works and just all the things you need to take care of somebody. In our legal system, you are presumed to have the ability to make decisions for yourself, regardless of how bad they are. You can make as many bad decisions as you want in your life as long as you understand that it is a bad decision. It's only when you cannot understand the decision anymore that you are deemed that you can't make those decisions. That's a really, really high burden. And there are a lot of HD individuals who fall in that category for a very, very long time. So asset protection. The purpose for asset protection is that government benefits, there are a number of government benefits that look at resources and assets. Federal programs include supplemental security income, Medicaid, food stamps, and housing assistance. And also things like LAHEAP, which is that's under state programs, but like energy assistance programs and temporary assistance for needy families. So there are benefits out there, but they have very strict financial criteria and very strict asset protection. So what is an asset? It's a lot of things. These is specifically what Social Security counts as an asset, but a lot of states' supplemental security income is tied to Medicaid, so it's a good starting point. But they look at cash, bank accounts, stocks, savings bonds, land and property. It doesn't include your home, but if you have any additional property, even if it's a half an acre in the middle of the woods that's worth $500, that counts towards your asset limit. And I've had families in that situation. Vehicles, timeshares. These rules are really antiquated, and you're only allowed to have, only one vehicle is exempt. If you have any additional vehicles count as an asset. And it doesn't take much for one vehicle, even if it's 10 years old, to get you over the asset limit, because for a single person, it's $2,000. For a married couple, it's $3,000. Like my 2005 Subaru was worth still $5,000 after 15 years. So automatically, it doesn't take much. They look at retirement accounts, life insurance policies over $1,500, burial funds over $1,500, personal property, and then they look at deemed resources. So that if anybody is giving you gifts or in-kind support, if you live in someone's house rent-free, that counts. That is really Social Security specific, but that still can count as an asset and can hurt people. So what are some asset protection options? There's trusts, caregiver agreements, ABLE accounts, and estate planning. This is I know enough to provide general information, but if you're interested more in this kind of thing, you would want to talk to an elder law attorney or a special needs trust attorney, because these are very specific and specialized things, and the rules differ from state to state, so you'd want to talk to a specialized expert in your state. I can just give you general information of what they are and how they work. So trusts, those are generally a relationship where one person holds title to property or assets, either to keep for their own use or the benefit of another. Trusts are very state specific. There are two kinds of trusts. There are revocable trusts, which allow you to retain control of the assets in your lifetime. They're flexible, but they cannot be used to protect assets from Medicaid or Social Security because you still maintain control of them. Irrevocable trusts, they transfer the assets out of your estate. You cannot change the terms of them or decide to dissolve the trust once it's created, but that is how you protect assets. And a lot of times there's a lot of flexibility for what you can use money for, but you're going to have to go through a trustee. And the trustee can be a family member, it might be a private institution, it might be a private organization that works specifically, and there's guardian pooled trusts. So there are pooled trust accounts where somebody manages all of this stuff, but those are specifically designed to help people who need SSI or Medicaid, and so you can use them for housing or healthcare. There's a lot of stuff that these things can be used for, and you can set up a trust that states specifically what you want the money used for and what is allowable. These are the most important trusts to be aware of for the HD community. There's special needs trusts, which are meant for dependents who receive government benefits like Social Security and Medicaid. Setting up the trust enables the disabled person to receive income without impacting government payments. And Medicaid, there's a 5-year look-back period. Social Security's, there's not. So let's say you have $50,000 in April. You put it all in a pooled trust. In May, all of that money is in the pooled trust, so it shows that you have no assets, so now you are SSI eligible. They don't have a look-back period. They just look at it from month to month. Then there are Medicaid asset protection trusts, which are specifically designed to help someone become Medicaid eligible. And then income trusts also deal with Medicaid eligibility. Again, these are very specialized. You would want to work with a specialized attorney in your state to make sure everything is done properly, because there are so many rules attached to these things. Another way of asset protection is a caregiver agreement. So let's say you're caring for your loved one. You can be compensated, and it's a way for you to be compensated and also to protect their assets, because it helps avoid the Medicaid penalty period that can result from transferring assets to a family member, because you weren't just giving it to them, they were working and it was an agreement that you had. And as long as you have something in writing, and it's an effective way of giving back to those who provide care. But again, this has to be in writing. This is something that you need to have in writing beforehand. And even if you're not good about collecting what you're owed every month, it's okay. Like, as long as you have the document in writing, and again, it's like helping reduce the loved one's assets. If like that's the end goal, take care of them as long as you can, but also help for Medicaid eligibility. It's a win-win situation. Because caregiving is hard, and so that's something you have to consider over the course of your loved one's life. How long can you provide care? When is possibly a long-term care facility a better place, depending on the level of care that they need? Those are just things to think about, and that's a very personal choice. And this is what should be included in a caregiver agreement. It has 3 basic requirements. It must be in writing, the payment must be for care provided in the future, and compensation for care must be reasonable. Like, it should not be more than what would be paid to a third party. So it shouldn't be like some wild overpayment and some wild underpayment. It should be like close to an average of what it is in the area. Another option is an ABLE account. This is a great option, but it's specific to individuals who are 26 and younger. So this is more for individuals who are impacted earlier in life. This works like a special needs trust without all the cost and hassle of setting it up. Like, there are tax advantage savings accounts, and money in an ABLE account does not count for Medicaid or supplemental security income purposes. Again, it's just that there's a strict age requirement. Each state has a different age limit. The interesting thing, you don't have to get an ABLE account from your state. You can shop around and choose what state's ABLE account you like best. I didn't need one, but I was shopping around just to see, because I thought that was an interesting like little quirk. But some states you can have up to $235,000, and some states you can have up to $529,000 in them. The one exception is if you have SSI, you can't have more than $100,000 in your account in a year. But there's a lot of qualified expenses that things can be used for, including education, food, housing, personal support services, and anything that improves health, independence, and quality of life. That includes vacations and monies for hobbies, because that is just as equally important. Just because you have a disability does not mean you cannot live a full life and get to do the things that you enjoy. And we forget that sometimes because we have a negative perception of what a disability is in our society, but that doesn't make you still have joy, you still get to do the things that are fun, and you still get to use your own assets to do fun things. And then this is something everyone should do, estate planning. I like to nag people all the time. I'm so fun at parties. My family doesn't like me right now. But this is really a plan for it's a plan to to protect and distribute your assets, instructions for your care, and provide for your loved ones during your life and upon your death. And it can include a lot of different things. Instructions for passing your valuables, instructions for your care if you become disabled, naming a guardian for minor children if anything happens to you, providing for family members with special needs without disrupting government benefits, providing for the transfer of your business at retirement, disability, or death, life insurance, disability income, and long-term care insurance. I can't talk about this, but minimizing taxes, court costs, and unnecessary legal fees. So depending on how you do estate planning, you can do your estate plan so it doesn't have to go through probate, and so you don't have to put a loved one through that process. And it's an ongoing process. You need to update your will as your life progresses. Things are going to be different at 35 than they are at 50, than they are at 70. And if you don't have an estate plan, your state already has one for you. If you become mentally incapacitated, your state will appoint a guardian or conservator. And if you haven't given any indication who you would want that to be, they just arbitrarily decide. And upon your death, your assets will be distributed according to state law. So you don't want your state to get to decide these things for you. Generally, these are the documents included in the estate plan: will, a living will and advance directive, power of attorney, and medical power of attorney. So this leads me to legal decision making. So that's appointing someone to act on your behalf to make legal, financial, and medical decisions. So I'm going to talk about durable power of attorney, medical power of attorney, guardianship, and conservatorship. But first, why does this matter? If you do not give a specific person the ability to act on your behalf, you may lose that right entirely. And again, the court can choose somebody. They can choose whoever they want. Someone could be appointed to make decisions for you that does not know you or your wishes. Generally, the court tries to appoint somebody who is either a licensed professional or somebody who is going to act in your best interest, but that doesn't always happen. And you may lose the ability to make decisions, but are not disabled enough for someone to be appointed to make decisions for you. So then you fall into the holes in the legal system. You become homeless. You could be denied essential benefits because you cannot complete the application. You stop getting important medical care because you don't remember how to get there. You have no transportation to get there. There's a lot of reasons why these things happen. And unfortunately, with Huntington's disease, if you stop getting medical care, you can't apply for Social Security disability because you have to have a medical diagnosis to be, like, you have to show that you are disabled to be approved for Social Security disability. So if you don't have medical care, that's impossible. So, power of attorneys. Healthcare power of attorney, that's pretty straightforward. These are like the easiest ones to get. It gives it gives power to a person to make medical decisions on your behalf if you are unconscious or mentally incapacitated. The next one is a durable power of attorney. And the reason I specify a durable power of attorney is because this is what you need in the HD community. A regular power of attorney is not enough. It expires once somebody becomes incapacitated. A durable power of attorney continues to exist. You get your physician to sign an affidavit that you are no longer competent. So you can specify who that physician is. It can be your neurologist that you have worked with for years, who has seen your progression and understands what is going on. And it can list out, like, if your spouse were to die beforehand, who is next in line. Like, so you can lay out a lot of things. You can lay out what kind of decisions you want them to make for you. You have a lot of control in that situation. The other thing is, if you sign a durable power of attorney, you're not giving away your decision-making rights. Like, any one of us in the room right now could sign a durable power of attorney. We all still have the capacity to make decisions for ourselves. You know who uses these things like all the time? Businessmen and rich people who are like, I have a business deal, but I'm leaving the country. Can you just sign this for me? Like, we think that a power of attorney means we're giving our rights away, and that is not true at all. You're specifically telling someone what decisions you want made and what decisions they can help you with, but you don't lose the decision-making ability until you lack capacity. So there's a long time before, like, you lose those decisions, and really you should be choosing somebody who you've had these conversations with, who you trust, who's like, oh yeah, I trust you to make that decision for me, it's okay, or I trust you to, like, help make sure this gets stated and decided. I just like to be very clear with this because a lot of people are afraid that they're signing away their rights, and I'm like, no, you're not. Guardianship and conservatorship take away your rights. A durable power of attorney does not. Guardianship and conservatorship get confusing because states literally use these two terms interchangeably. Some use them, guardianship for the person, conservatorship for the estate. Sometimes one means for children, the other means for adults. It's just all over the place. But essentially, whether your state has guardianship or conservatorship or a combination of both, what it means is the state, like, you have to go to court for the state to decide if you have capacity. If you no longer have capacity to make legal financial decisions or to take care of yourself, a guardian or conservator will be appointed for you. Like, and here I use the example, Louisiana uses guardianship for both, but it really is all over the place. I was giving a social worker training yesterday, and they're like, but we use this here and this here, and I'm like, I didn't make up the rules, I just know what the words are and what, like, it's okay. And this is just a really quick summary of the big differences between power of attorney and guardianship. Power of attorney allows the HD individual or any individual to appoint a person to manage their affairs, and it can be revoked at any point. And it can be written so it only takes effect when the HD individual is no longer mentally competent or anybody is no longer mentally competent. With guardianship, the adult with HD is deemed incapacitated by the state in a legal proceeding. There's no consent from the HD individual. This can be a very contentious process. It can be a very expensive process, and it takes effect upon court ruling and is very difficult to revoke. And in some states, if you're a guardian or a conservator, you have to go to court every time you want to do something or change something. Some states are more relaxed in that, but like if you live in a state where you have to go to court for everything, sometimes it's a better idea to hire a professional guardian because it's a really difficult process to manage. But those are just different options that exist. So now, we're going to talk about insurance benefit planning. I was just checking the time because I have a lot to say. Okay, so insurance benefit planning is a fairly broad category, but there's a lot of different types of insurance we in the HD community need to consider. We need to consider disability insurance, both short-term and long-term, health insurance, and life insurance. There are other auxiliary insurances that I'm not going to talk about today, because things like there's critical care insurance. That happens if you have a specific health condition. HD is not on that list. There's accident insurance, which covers you if you get in some kind of accident. That's not going to be HD related, but like if you get in a car accident or an accident at work, like that can cover you. So there are other kinds of insurances that might be good, but they're not HD specific because they won't cover Huntington's disease. But you never know what's going to happen in life. As Mean Girls taught us, we could all get hit by a bus tomorrow. So why does insurance benefit planning matter? It matters because if you don't prepare in advance, you're going to miss out on benefits that you're entitled to. You have a window to sign up for these things because most of these benefits you have to pay into for at least a year or for some period of time before you can start using them. They can create financial difficulties if you don't have the right policies in place. For example, the national average for a Social Security disability decision right now is 6 to 7 months, but the process can take years if you get denied. But if you have short-term and long-term disability in place, either through a private policy or your provider, that'll cover the time your Social Security disability application is pending and you're not going without income. And I know not everybody has access to that, like not everybody employer offers it, and sometimes these policies can be expensive, but it is something to consider. And again, you need to be able to access health insurance and health care to get proper care and also to get disability benefits. Like your long-term disability provider is not going to approve you for benefits if you have no medical documentation. Social Security is not going to approve you for benefits if you have no medical documentation. And a gene test is not enough because HD is genetic and hereditary. You've had the gene since the moment you were born. Both long-term, short-term disability and Social Security only care about your Huntington's disease once it starts to impact your ability to work and your day-to-day life. And then I have this handy little graphic up here because it shows you the intersection of benefits. You can be getting all of the different outside benefits, so short-term disability, long-term disability, state disability, FMLA, at the same time you apply and receive Social Security disability insurance. So there's no reason, like you do not have to exhaust one benefit to apply for another. That's why I always tell families to start with short-term, long-term, or state disability, and then do their Social Security disability application so they have benefits while they're working on the more difficult application and they're still getting income. And then this is not super, like I hope you guys can read all of this, but this is just a nice chart that really summarizes the different kind of benefits. And I'm going to go into more detail. I just wanted to summarize it first. The main categories of benefits are public benefits, private benefits, and employer benefits. So public benefits, and like I said, I'll go into more detail. Private and employer benefits offer the most options, and I'll talk about what the biggest differences between those are. But just know that in the benefit categories, the biggest differences are public benefits, private benefits, and employer benefits. And when I say private benefits, it means you directly contacted the company and got a life insurance claim, a short-term or long-term disability or claim or whatever through that company. So you went directly to MassMutual, you went directly to Liberty Financial, you went directly to Prudential, you went directly to Lincoln Financial. I know the names of too many of these companies because I've asked too many questions over the years. But first we're going to talk about public benefits. So we're going to talk, one of the biggest one is Social Security. Everybody's familiar with Social Security. Social Security is not just retirement. Social Security is disability, retirement, and survivor's benefits. So if your W-2 at the end of the year is like you paid this much into Social Security, you're paying into the disability, retirement, and survivor's benefit program. So you're paying into all of them. Social Security Disability Insurance, or SSDI, that's the program you want to be eligible for disability. It is the most robust program, and you're going to get the most benefits from it. From the chart, you can see that the max benefit you can get right now is $3,800 a month. The national average is about $1,500, and it lasts until death or retirement. So when you're on disability until you reach full retirement age, and then it just switches in name. You can't get disability and retirement at the same time because it's the same program. But let's say you're approved for disability at 55. Once you reach 67, the name changes to retirement, but you continue receiving that benefit. And with SSDI, you get Medicare. And then with SSI, Supplemental Security Income, that's the financial need-based program through Social Security. The max benefit is only $914 a month, and the national average right now is about $600. Again, you get that until death or retirement, and that SSI can supplement your retirement benefit. If you're only getting $400 a month in retirement, you can get SSI to at least bump you up to the max amount. And with SSI, you get Medicaid. Some states you automatically get Medicaid. Some states you automatically become Medicaid eligible, but you still have to submit a separate application. And then in other fun states, like my fun, useless state of Virginia, they're like, we don't care. You just have to submit a separate Medicaid application, and we'll just analyze these things differently. States' rights, like nothing is consistent. So as like the national person doing all this, I'm like, I need to know your state so I can give you state specific details, because nothing is consistent across the board. And then a few states have temporary state disability. It's only 5 of them. So I'm not really going to go into a lot of detail, but if you live in California, Maryland, New York, New Jersey, or Rhode Island, your state has a state disability benefit program, and so you're eligible for benefits that a lot of people aren't, and they can last anywhere from 6 to 12 months. You do have to make sure your employer is paying into that program. Most of them do, but it means like you want to take your temporary state disability before you would apply for Social Security. So, what are the differences between Medicaid and Medicare? Medicaid, you hear certain government officials say Medicare for all. I'm like, no. We need Medicaid for all. I see people nodding their heads. They're like, yes. And because while not every provider takes Medicaid, Medicaid actually offers better care. Medicaid covers long-term care and in-home care. It is the only insurance that covers long-term care and in-home care. Medicare is not going to help you. But Medicaid has strict financial criteria. There are no premiums with Medicaid, and you get a lot of wonderful coverage. With Medicare, you have to be over 65, or you have to be approved for Social Security disability insurance or adult child disability benefits. So there's no other way to get Medicare. There's no other way to get Medicare. There are no financial limits. And most of us right now are paying into Medicare, so we're going to have a subsidized premium. If you never paid into Medicare, or you immigrated to this country later and like you didn't pay enough into Medicare, your premium is going to be substantially higher per month. The the monthly premium right now is $144.60, but you could pay upwards of $400 to $800 a month for Medicare. And so that's why sometimes it's like better to just do the health insurance marketplace. There is inpatient and outpatient coverage. You need Part D for more coverage. Like Medicaid can cover vision, it can cover dental, it will cover medications. That's not the case with Medicare. Often you need to get a Part D plan to cover medications, to get vision, to get dental. There's a lot of Medicare Advantage plans, which can be great for some people, but they can also take away your rehabilitation services. Like you'd have to look into this, but I know like any of my friends who work in rehab or occupational or physical therapists, they're like, stay away from Medicare Advantage plans because they take away some of your options. So you have to look, like it's a lot of stuff to consider. And then like I said, Medicare does not cover long-term care costs. So some people can actually get Medicare and Medicaid because Medicare has these Medicare savings programs, and if you're only getting a certain amount of money per month, you can qualify for the qualified Medicare beneficiary plan. I don't remember all the names of them. There's like QMB, SLP, like they have these acronyms because we love acronyms, but it gives you different benefits. Like for QMB, it means you would essentially get Medicaid with your Medicare. For some of the programs, they cover your Medicare premium, but there are just different options. So if you are Medicare approved and you can't cover the cost of your premium, you may be eligible for additional assistance. I just say that like as a trigger now. I do not expect anyone in this room to remember all of this information because it's a lot of information. I get told all the time I say too much, but there's so much to talk about. I'm sorry. And this is just a map of states where they have expanded Medicaid, and that's important to know because there are fewer restrictions and it's significantly easier to get Medicaid in the states that have adopted it. The states that have not adopted Medicaid are a pain in the butt, and as an adult, you essentially have to be approved for supplemental security income to be Medicaid eligible, or you have to need 24-hour nursing home care. Because that's so easy. Like those two things are such easy qualifications. I'm not sassy or have lots of opinions at all. Okay, so now I'm talking about private and employer benefits at the same time because essentially they're the same things. Employer provided benefits are private benefits, but your employer subsidizes them. So retirement, this is a really important thing, and people need to understand their retirement benefits because retirement benefits can also be used as disability benefits. They provide income when you stop working due to age, like that's the initial intent. But something people don't know is if you are found disabled either through Social Security or your doctor writes a note saying that you're permanently disabled, you can withdraw your retirement funds before 59 and a half without penalty because you aren't working anymore, and you shouldn't be penalized because essentially you had to retire early. So you'd have to work through your specific company, like either your specific 401k, IRA, or whatever, because they'll have specific regulations. But if you have been deemed permanently disabled, you can withdraw tax-free from your retirement account before 59 and a half. So a 401k is an employer-sponsored retirement savings fund that's funded by pre-tax payroll deduction. So if you have a 401k, your employer is they set that up for you, and they a lot of times contribute to it. Let's say if you put in 4%, they'll match the 4%. An IRA, some companies will say we've opened this for you, but they don't contribute anything. It's just what you contribute. And a 401k is pre-tax dollars. An IRA, it can be pre-tax dollars. It's more confusing, but all 401k is always pre-tax dollars, and generally an IRA is post-tax dollars. And then a 401(b), this is very specific to those who work for public employment. So whether you're a teacher or a state employee, so schools, universities, churches, these are what you would pay into if you don't want to pay into the state system. If you know, Louisiana. Louisiana. I had a client once who was a teacher in the state of Louisiana. I had no idea that she paid into a completely separate retirement program, and I had to learn real fast to fix her Social Security disability claim, and I was like, I'm never making that mistake again. But if you know you're going to live in Louisiana for your entire career, then you pay into the Louisiana state program. They have their own disability and retirement program. It's great. But if you know you're going to move around a lot, and let's say you're a teacher and you teach in Louisiana for 3 years, you teach in Tennessee for 4 years, you teach in Nevada for 5 years, you teach in Texas for 3 years, and then your HD becomes symptomatic, you're not eligible for those state programs in any of those states because you didn't work there long enough. And so that's when you hope that you have a 401(b), because then that is your disability retirement plan. Anybody who pays into these systems their HR person should have had this conversation with them, but that's not always the case. So I'm well, now you're going to hear it from me because I don't want anybody to be in this situation. But the big difference is when it comes to retirement between federal and public, never mind, I confused myself. But essentially, private and employer retirement, it works the same way. They all have the same rules. Otherwise, 401k, IRA, 401(b), those work the same across the board. The big difference is when you're talking about federal retirement or public retirement. And like I just mentioned, that's why the 401(b) exists. It gets confusing because if you work for the federal government, you actually pay into their federal retirement system and Social Security, so you have to apply for both benefits. If you work just for a state system, you only pay into the state system, so you don't pay into Social Security. So just when you start, you, yourself, your kids are starting a job, make sure they ask that question so they know what they're paying into, so they know what they're going to get in disability or retirement. Nobody wants to become disabled, but 25% of Americans, 1 in 4 Americans, will become disabled in their lifetime. So we need to ask these questions and we need to know these things. Again, I am not fun at parties. I do harass my friends and I tell people did you know these things? And they're like, no. And then no one talks to me. Whatever. Okay, so now I'm specifically going to talk about private and employer benefits and where you see the biggest differences between the two. For short-term disability, this is generally awarded for 6 to 8 weeks. Some policies are up to 6 months. You'd have to read your personal policy. They provide 50 to 60% of your monthly income. It's generally paid as a lump sum. There's a 1-week waiting period, and you can use sick time for this waiting period. Everyone should pay into this benefit. And It's usually easier to get this as an employer-provided benefit. If you're going to get this as a private benefit, they always tie it to long-term disability because it's a weird thing to get on its own. And so they're like, we want you to get short-term just to cover the waiting period for your long-term. So they will bundle the packages if you get a private plan. And as a woman who is actually going to have a baby this year, most employers do not offer maternity leave. So if you want maternity leave, you have to pay into short-term disability to get it. If you're lucky enough to work for an employer who offers maternity leave, that's fantastic. That is not always the case. And so you have to pay into it. It's just a good idea to pay into short-term disability because sometimes you get sick. Like you don't know what's going to happen. There are reasons why short-term disability may come up. And so it's a good thing to pay into. And if it's through your employer, it's not expensive. Private policies definitely are more expensive, but you can play around with them to fit your needs. But employer-provided policies, it's pennies on the dollar. They subsidize so much of it. It is 100% worth it to pay into it. Okay. You see more differences between private and employer benefits when we talk about long-term disability. They all help replace up to 60% of your income if you become sick or injured. The waiting period can be, it's 3 to 6 months depending on the policy, but you can, I think, go up to, no, I think 6 months is the most you can really go up to like a private policy. The important thing to know is long-term policies can last 2, 5, 10 years or until retirement. And you're gonna have to read through your employer policy to figure that out. And that can really change the cost if you're looking at it from a private policy perspective. You have to pay into the policy for at least a year before you can use it. And most of these policies require you to apply for Social Security disability insurance. The reason for that is because it's an offset. Let's say you get $4,000 from your long-term disability provider and you're eligible for $2,000 a month for Social Security. Your long-term provider isn't going to pay the $4,000 and you get the $2,000 on top of it. You're not going to get $6,000. You're never going to get more than $4,000. It just means the long-term disability company doesn't have to pay all of the $4,000. Social Security pays some of it. There are some policies that exist that you might be able to stack, but that gets more expensive and you have to do your due diligence. Because there's not technically a rule saying you can only have one long-term disability policy, but that's a personal preference and what you can afford and research you have to do on your own. But the big difference is a private policy follows you throughout your career. It's not job dependent. You have it as long as you're paying into the policy. They are more expensive because they're not subsidized. You have to pay the whole cost of it. An employer policy, they're significantly subsidized, but the policy does not follow you when you leave your job, and you can't use the policy if you're fired. So this becomes an issue if you're thinking of getting gene tested when you're young, because long-term disability policies will ask about your genetic status and they will ask about your family history. And so if you know you're going to work at the same job for 40 years, cool. You will be covered. Your long-term disability policy will cover you. Let's say you worked at your job for 3 years and then you get tested. You've been paying into the policy since before you got tested, so it's going to continue to cover you. But let's say you test at 25 and get a new job at 30. That new job's long-term disability policy isn't going to cover Huntington's disease because most of these policies say if you've been diagnosed with something more than 12 to 24 months before you start the policy, they won't cover you for that condition. So that is something to be aware of, which is why if you can afford it, again, one of my favorite websites is policygenius.com because they have a lot of insurance options and you can play around with things. I play around with things to see, so I'm not just giving out resources that I made up. I've gone and I've used these things, and you can do a whole different combination of things to find a policy that is way more affordable. You can make an $800 a month long-term disability policy, or you can make a $100 a month long-term disability policy. So you can make things that will still provide income. It may not provide income until you retire, but it may be an extra sum of money for 2 to 5 years that'll help you figure out what works best for you. Health insurance. Health insurance is a must. Health insurance is protected by GINA, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. So no genetic diagnosis impacts your ability to get health insurance. What impacts your cost of care is when you start when your HD progresses and when you start needing more care because of your HD, that's when your health insurance tend to get more expensive because you want it to cover the medications and the care. Having the genetic diagnosis itself isn't going to increase your premiums. It's really when you're looking at what kind of care do you need that you're going to start getting more expensive health insurance if you can afford it. Health insurance covers the cost of medical expenses. I don't remember the statistic off the top of my head, but most debt in the United States is caused by medical expenses. Oh, it's on my slide. I just don't remember what the statistic is. Yeah, and I kind of mentioned, like, you change your insurance plan to fit your needs. Again, the big difference between private and employer benefits is the cost of the premiums. When it's private, you're paying the full cost of the premium. When it's through your employer, it's subsidized premiums. You may not, but one thing that can happen is, like, your employer may not offer the greatest plans, so you may be, like, pigeonholed into what your options are. But if it's subsidized, it's hard to go to the marketplace and be like, no, I'm going to pay for this significantly more expensive policy. So that's a hard choice. When you have a private plan, your employment status does not impact the benefits. With an employer, if you leave because you're fired, I think it works if you're fired. There are certain circumstances that if you leave the job, you can opt into COBRA. You have 30 days to opt into COBRA, which means your health insurance will continue, but you are then paying the full cost of the premium, which is going to be significantly higher than what you were paying. And you can have COBRA up to 18 months. You do not have to be on it all that time. You could be on it like for a month or two to figure out like another policy option, to get insurance through your spouse, to get a healthcare marketplace insurance, to apply for Medicaid, whatever. You could just use it to buy time. Some people are able to afford it the whole time period. And if you are approved for Social Security disability insurance, you get an additional 11 months to cover the entire 29-month Medicare waiting period. So there are options, it usually is going to cost you. Life insurance, the benefit of life insurance is that ultimately, life insurance is more to give you peace of mind because it provides a benefit to your family members when you pass away. And it's a tax-free payout, and it covers a lot of things. You can use it to co-sign debt, mortgages, living expenses for your family, home labor expenses, burial expenses, medical expenses. Again, the big difference between private and employer benefits is a private policy is going to likely require it can require a medical evaluation, not always, and it will likely ask about a family history of HD. Different policies ask different questions. The 3 questions that are most common is, do you have a family history of HD? Has an immediate family member been diagnosed with HD? Have you been diagnosed with HD? Employer-provided benefits, there's no medical evaluation. Like most of them, if you just get the base coverage for your salary or whatever the base coverage is, it's just yours. If you want to get additional coverage, they may ask those questions. They may make you go through a medical evaluation, but with work, at least your base coverage is guaranteed, no questions asked. Another really good option is a group policy, like if you have an alumni association, if you're part of a professional organization. Like for me, I get stuff from the state bar all the time, please get life insurance. Or if you're like a member through AAA, it can be easier to get these group life insurance policies because so many people pay into them. And so there are a lot of people who pay into them that don't use them. So there's more money to cover those policies and they don't ask as many specific questions. We're full of people watching me drink water. I apologize. Okay. So now that we've talked about all these different benefit options, I also created a really amazing, wonderful new resource. We didn't print enough copies because I didn't know how useful it would be. It was designed more for the NYA and for younger individuals entering the workforce, but it's called Entering the Workforce, What to Know with a Family History of HD, and it's this really amazing little booklet that has a lot of this information that I've talked about the insurances, about health insurance, disability insurance, retirement. And it's things to know about like what these general benefits are and what you need to look for when you're looking for these policies and when you're thinking about benefits through your job, what are important benefits. But when should you look for benefits? And really you need to start thinking about these things as soon as you enter the workforce, as soon as you get a job that offer you these benefits, you need to start paying into these things. And for private stuff, you have to think about these things before genetic testing and a clinical diagnosis, because your genetic status will change what you have access to. And a lot of time, for a lot of things, like for some policies, they may just make it significantly more expensive, but a lot of times it's going to disqualify you from the benefit. For life insurance, long-term disability insurance, and long-term care insurance, you will be disqualified from policies if you have been diagnosed with Huntington's disease. And I didn't talk about long-term care insurance because it's not a sustainable option for the HD community anymore. Like you're not going to get long-term care insurance if you have been diagnosed with HD or if you have a family history. You're going to like literally have to submit a negative gene test. But long-term care insurance is really difficult across the board. If you have sciatica, they're going to deny your application. And so I think it's better for individuals and families to look into other financial options like a high-yield savings account, because there are no strings attached to that. You don't have to ask for anybody to use that money. It's your money. And I've talked to a lot of families recently who have long-term care policies, but they're not paying out for things they said they would. So there's more pushback. And so I just don't think, especially like somebody who's my age, like and younger, I just don't think it's really a legitimate option for younger generations anymore. So we need to look at different things. And really, okay, so one question I get asked a lot, and I'm not going to really talk about that today, or not in this presentation. I'll talk a little bit more in my presentation this afternoon, what to tell your employer, but when to stop working. And that's always going to be a personal choice that depends on you and your symptoms and your job. But the big things is you should start thinking about applying for disability when your HD symptoms start to impact your ability to work and your activities of daily living. This includes your short-term and long-term disability, either your private policy or through your employer and Social Security. And it's really important to have these conversations and be aware of these things. We know that doesn't always happen, but, and like, I don't read my husband's performance reviews. I'm assuming he's doing fine at work. I don't know if you guys read your spouse's performance reviews or like have those conversations, but that's kind of something you need to start being aware of if your spouse or someone in your family has Huntington's disease, because if you get fired, you lose access to your short-term and long-term and any of your benefits through your employer. Those just end. If you quit, please don't do that. Like not for HD related reasons. If you're quitting for other reasons, fine, okay, quit. But if you're quitting because you can't work anymore because of your HD, you're gonna lose your benefits. And you don't wanna do that. You're leaving thousands of dollars on the table. Do not do that. Okay. So like again, I'm talking a little bit about long-term care planning, but it's really to summarize that long-term care planning is the culmination of all of the disability umbrella categories. You want to have all these things in place, so when it comes to this point, all you're really thinking about, okay, is what is the facility I want my family member to go to? Or what does this look like for us? Are we going to get an in-home care nurse? Are we going to change our house? What do those things look like? Those are the things I want you to be having conversations about. Those are the things I want you to think about, not like panicking because you need Medicaid, not panicking because now you have to get guardianship, panicking because there wasn't a financial plan so you don't know how you're going to provide the care, or you don't know what their wishes are. And just here's a little, I really like charts, if you hadn't noticed, but I think they're like a nice way to summarize information. But long-term care options include home care, assisted living care, nursing home care, and memory care. And you can see that care costs are not cheap. These things get incredibly expensive, especially once you get to nursing home care and memory care. And you can see that a lot of this stuff, oh, sorry, I was confused by my own chart. It's been a morning. With medical care, like if you're providing in-home care, like unless you're a physician or a nurse or some kind of specialist, you're likely not going to be able to provide the medical care at home yourself, so you're going to have to pay for that out of pocket. Possibly, you might have Medicaid, so you can get an in-home care nurse to come, but in a lot of states, there's like a 5-year wait list for that, so you're likely going to be paying for those costs out of pocket. Assisted living care does not provide medical care. Nursing home care and memory care facilities will provide medical care. And then you can see what facilities provide rehab care, what facilities provide memory care services, and what Medicaid will cover. And Medicaid doesn't cover assisted living because that's not the 24-hour care need. Like a lot of individuals can go because there's a lot of assisted living facilities that start when like you're in your own home and like you transition to like as you need more care, like you move to either like a smaller, you move from like a house to a 2-bedroom apartment to a 1-bedroom apartment, because the amount of care is so diversified. And so it gets really confusing, because if you actually start looking up care facilities, like there's a big difference between assisted living and nursing home care. We use these terms interchangeably, but they are not interchangeable. I have not dealt with this. Like, I know enough to like provide this information. I am not specialized in this enough, because it's definitely a complex area. Probably shouldn't throw Mary Ann Emmerich under the bus, but she worked in a nursing home care facility, so she definitely knows more. So someone within the HD organization who knows more about this than I do is Mary Ann Emmerich, but there are other organizations and resources you can access, because again, this is going to be something that's state specific. So that's all for my presentation. We're going to get to questions, but if you follow this, oh my God, QR code, words are hard for me right now. This will take you to the HDSA disability resource page, and you can find a whole bunch of resources. You can find the 20 webinars that I have recorded. You can find checklists. You can find disability booklets. You can find so many different things about the disability process based on where you are in the journey. I have this really wonderful blog that I've started that like talks more about the disability umbrella and just different aspects, because there's so much. I've created a lot of information, and that's more so you can access it when you're ready, because there's a lot of different components to this, and you can always reach out to me. So are there any questions? Oh wait, before I forget, we are doing surveys electronically this year, so please, when you are done, complete the survey in the app and let me know what you think. And then this is my contact information, and now I'm happy to take any questions. And I'll go back to the QR code. Yes. So the question was, have I ever seen a situation where someone is on disability and then they go back to work? Yes. It's more complicated with like the rules for that are different for every long-term disability policy, but a lot of times what your like a private or employer long-term disability policy will say is you're covered for what your past work was. So let's say you can't do your past work, but you want to go do something else that maybe isn't as intense or it's not a high level, then you should be okay to do that. Social Security has their own rules for being able to go back to work. It's a financial thing, and so their limits are to apply for Social Security disability in 2023, you have to make less than $1,470 per month. Once you're approved for disability, that amount goes down, I think it's to like $1,000 a month, but really as long as you're staying below the $1,470 a month, you're going to be able to continue getting your SSDI benefit and work at the same time. But yeah, I know that's a very small limit. So what happens is if you end up making more money than that, your Social Security disability benefits will stop. But let's say you're able to work for like 3 years, you're within the expedited reinstatement period, and so you would really just literally have to fill out a 1-page application to reinstate your benefits. So if your benefits stop because you're working and you reported that to Social Security, there are a lot of rules to protect you. But you have to report that you're working to Social Security, otherwise they'll find out, be like, oh, you owe us a bunch of money, and you just lose your benefits, and you'd have to like apply all over again. So just make sure if you're going to work, make sure you let Social Security know. You're welcome. Yes. So the question was, there are downloadable medical power of attorney, durable power of attorney forms. What are my thoughts on those? That's hard because like I know some states, it's like legitimately through their state bar organization. And so that means they comply with state laws. They're really great to use. Some states, that's not the case. And I've tried, I haven't gone through every 50 state to know that yet. And so it's hit or miss. But I will say, like if it's a durable power of attorney, you're likely you want to get that verified through an attorney. You want to make sure everything is done correctly, because if your loved one becomes incapacitated, you want to make sure that document is still going to exist and you can still act in their best interest, because you don't want it to be a faulty durable power of attorney or something your state doesn't recognize and you think you're protected and then you're like, oh no, and then you have to go get guardianship. I don't know in Louisiana, I'd have to check. But those can be a really wonderful resource if your state has these forms specifically through the state bar website, or it says on there that this has been created with the state bar organization. That is going to be a legitimate document that you can use and will be protected in your state. Like I know Texas's state bar has done that. Again, not helpful for Louisiana, but like I know their states.
Two things. One interesting thing about Louisiana, when you get it notarized, in Louisiana, the notary has an obligation to determine whether the person signing is mentally competent, which I didn't see in California. Just a piece of information. The other thing, which a question I have, is on life insurance. I've had experience over the decades in this. It used to be they could not ask, maybe this is just California, genetic questions. More recently, I've had policies where they do ask specifically about Huntington's disease. And other policies they don't ask at all.
Yep. Yeah, it's really hit or miss. Like, and so because there's so many different policies and companies out there, I can't tell you which ones ask the questions which ways, because I honestly don't know. I know as there's become more awareness of Huntington's disease, just nationally and globally, insurance companies have become more aware and they started asking those questions. I know, because again, Gina doesn't provide enough protections. I know the state of Florida passed something like in 2019 that was like insurance companies can't use genetic information against people anymore, but I don't know how it's state by state, and I don't know if anybody else has really passed that restriction. Maybe California does have something, but that is not commonplace in the United States.
One thing about life insurance, one of the things that I was careful when my late wife passed, and her father actually, to try and get the cause of death to be something like pneumonia and not list Huntington's as a primary cause of death, or not listed at all. And often if you work with your physician, they will comply with that, because the immediate cause of death might be pneumonia, and that might affect their children's ability to get life.
No, it's true. And they're, unfortunately, because the Genetic Discrimination Act that we have only protects health insurance and your right to employment, genetic discrimination against Huntington's disease is legal. And it's really unfortunate, and it's one of the things that we need to work on. But it's a harsh reality right now. Yes?
One thing that my husband and I did for life insurance, and again, this was back in 1991, as soon as he was diagnosed, and he already had a life insurance policy, but our daughters at that time were 3 and 9. We had a basic life insurance policy, but then we went and upped it to, $200,000. And since they were so little, and again, back then, there were no questions, and I just remember the agent was like, whoa, you want to do this for a 3 and a 9-year-old? So we thought, good, because then that would still be set, and that would protect them. As you know, I have one daughter that passed away, and no repercussion, and on her death certificate, it did happen. But again, maybe because initially we had this in 1991.
Well, because I know, like, if you have small children now, I've definitely gotten things in the mail from like Gerber about getting child life insurance. So child life insurance is definitely a thing. One of the issues with it now, though, is it's a term life insurance policy, so it will expire when they turn 18. At that point, you could possibly transition it into a different term life insurance policy or a whole life insurance policy, but they're likely going to do another evaluation at that point. And so that's something to be aware of. Like, you can definitely get life insurance for your children. It's just, there are more rules around everything these days. Okay, so the question was, I talked earlier about assets, and if you have a mortgage or a car payment on your car or your home, how that would impact your assets. The home is still considered yours even if you have a loan on it. The car, the full value of the car is still considered yours. So if you buy a brand new car, and even though you have like the majority of the loan left on it, it is still considered your car, and that is going to count as an asset against you. They don't look at debts. Like Social Security doesn't look at debts when they're looking at assets. They're fun. and very equitable. Okay, the question is, how does Social Security consider a business asset? Well, okay, so I would hope in that, if you have a business asset because you're self-employed, as long as you were correctly reporting all of your earnings to the IRS and appropriately filed taxes every year, then you would be eligible for SSDI, and SSDI doesn't look at assets. You could literally win the lottery and still be entitled to your SSDI benefit. It's just an issue when it's supplemental security income or Medicaid. And I think it depends, like if it's a business asset, how, like if you've created an LLC, it really depends how the assets are in your name, or if they're in an LLC, or if there's something else. It really depends on who ownership is sitting with, and that's how they'll look at things differently. But like, yeah, if everything's in your name, then that is going to count as an asset for like Medicaid purposes. But again, if you've been working and paying your taxes and Social Security has all your work credits, then you would be applying for SSDI, and you wouldn't have to worry about assets at that point.
Just want to mention one other thing in my experience in this, and that is generally when I'm buying life insurance, long-term care insurance, health insurance, your insurance agent is your friend.
Yeah.
And you can be frank with your insurance agent. I always wondered about that. If I say something, are they going to report, a family history of Huntington's disease to the insurance companies? But my experience, and I don't know if this is generally true, was that they would help you plan and look at medical questionnaires to see whether they ask for Huntington's. And so that's my experience. I don't know.
Well, and I think it can be helpful to work with an insurance broker these days to help, but I don't know what their personal and ethical responsibilities are, and I don't know what that looks like. But I know HDSA has a relationship with Mass Mutual, and they're giving a presentation later this morning, and we've worked with them for years. And so it can be a good idea to go through an insurance broker if you have questions, and just to be able to talk to somebody. I know it can be nice to talk to somebody versus just playing around on a website. So that's still good advice. Yes. So the question was, what if you have funds, but it's not going to last the whole time that you need for your care? Does Social Security start counting as an asset? No. Supplemental security income never counts as an asset. Social Security disability insurance doesn't really count as an asset, but what can happen, really, the way our system is set up is you need to either be poor, you need to be impoverished to access benefits, or you need to be super rich, so you're I don't care. None of us fall into that category right now. And so what'll happen, if you are on SSI and Medicaid and you end up in a nursing facility, SSI and Medicaid will cover everything. You'll get $40 a month to pay for snacks and one shirt because of inflation. If you have SSDI and Medicaid, what'll happen is the facility will end up probably taking the majority of your SSDI or your retirement and putting it towards the facility, and then using Medicaid to cover the rest. So it doesn't count as an asset, but they'll take it. It won't disqualify you from Medicaid or nursing home care, but the government or the facility will take what limited you have to cover the costs of things. I didn't make up the rules. I don't like the rules. We don't have a great system.
If you've got money, you gotta hide it. Say we all have money. But yet it's not enough, I think it's
That's the risk,
it's not
right?
going to carry you through your life.
Yeah.
Me and my wife had it's not going to be enough to carry us all through life and pay
Yeah.
$100,000 in that long term.
Well, so then it just means you're reallocating it. So you're saving it so it's specialized for her care, and it doesn't count as an asset to prevent her from getting other necessary benefits. Because if I went back to my chart, who has $100,000 a year out of pocket to pay for one of these facilities? It's incredibly expensive. And so you do have to, because the non-impacted spouse, you deserve to still live and have care for yourself. That's why Medicaid eligibility rules change. If somebody needs 24-hour long-term care, then they look at assets differently. So let's say my husband needs 24-hour long-term care. I'm allowed to have $124,000 in assets for myself in my own care. So it changes substantially if you are looking for Medicaid just on a day-to-day health insurance basis, or if you need Medicaid for a long-term care insurance basis. But yeah, that's why like Medicaid and special needs trusts are your friends. And like, there are so many different kinds of attorneys out there, and you can't just say a disability attorney because they don't exist, because it's either Social Security disability, or it's the Americans with Disabilities Act disability, or it's an employment attorney disability kind of thing. And so if you're looking for somebody who specializes in these trusts, wills, power of attorney, you want to speak to an elder law attorney. And a really good place to start, I should have included this up here, I'm sorry, is NELA, the National Organization of, it's NAELA.org, or specialneedsalliance.org. Those are really good places to look for an attorney to help navigate this process. Are there any other questions? You guys have been wonderful. Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoy the rest of today, and thank you so much for sitting through this very complicated and intense presentation at 9 o'clock this morning. I appreciate all of you.